This week, we're going to be looking at capital budgeting and corporate governance. In particular, what we're looking at is how does a company use the limited amount of resources it has to get as big as it can, basically, and to make as much profit as it can. Does that mean staying production and everything stays domestic? Does that mean we need to go international? And if we do, who has control? All right, so let's start with looking at corporate governance. And by corporate governance, we mean who controls in a company, right? And we're talking about medium to large size companies. More than likely, we're looking at, as we go international, multinational corporations. But corporations themselves tend to be governed by a board of directors. Those are the top level people. They are even, as far as structure is concerned, they're above the CEO, the president, and things like that. So the board of directors usually appoints the president and those top level, the CEOs, the COOs. And it is really the job of the board of directors to oversee the company from a very macro perspective. What I mean by that is they are, if we're talking about a ship, and you want to get a ship from New York to England, corporate governance just says, okay, send the ship east. And we'll rely on the executives of the company to do the fine tuning, but we know we want to send the ship east. Corporations can also be directed to a certain extent by institutional investors. The institutional investments tend to be things like pension fund managers, mutual fund managers, things like that, in which you've got these conglomerations of stocks that are held. And because the group has so much money, think of a pension fund for a large corporation. There's lots of money there. It's not going to be distributed for quite a while. You've got to invest it. You've got to make it grow. And so these investors have a lot of power because they can't necessarily buy and sell stocks on a moment's notice because they are so large. They need to get information from others. It's hard for them to move quickly. So in order to realize that they're stuck with certain stocks, they may want to get a little more control so that they can make the money on the stocks they want. Institutional investors don't have to have a large percentage of the stock, but because they have even 5 or 10% of the stock, they have a big group of the stock. You could have thousands of investors, but one of them owns 10% of the stock. That could come with a lot of power. The other people who are holding power are shareholders, the everyday people who own your stock. It's the shareholders who meet at the annual meeting, who then vote on the things that the board of directors brings to them. Technically, remember, the shareholders are the owners, whereas the board of directors members and the president, the CEO, they may not be owners. I don't think I'd want to invest in a company where the CEO didn't own stock in the company, but that's a different issue. All right. What we're certain about is that the company wants to maximize its profit. In order to maximize its profit, it needs to get as much revenue as it can and keep costs as low as it can. And again, that's a very difficult balancing act. All right. So what we want to look at is how do multinational corporations, those corporations who choose to go international, how can they do it and still maximize their profit? I know we've looked at this a little bit before, but if you're going to go internationally, you can do it in several different ways. We're not talking the trade route where you make everything domestically and then you just ship it abroad. What we're talking about going international is having a presence overseas, being a truly multinational corporation. Now, you can do that by starting up your own subsidiary. All right. Just start a company, have a branch in another country. That's expensive and time consuming, right? But there are certain advantages of it. You can build it the way you want it. There's nothing preconceived about it. But again, the time it takes, the money it takes is an issue. You could purchase an existing company, and by public company I mean a company that that sells stock. All right, that's owned by the public. You could purchase one of that and absorb it into your company. Probably quicker than starting up your own company. But the problem is that it comes with preconceived corporate culture, ways of doing things, employees, all of those things. You could either buy the company outright, or you could buy a portion of it. You don't have to take it over completely. But if you buy enough stock, you can control it, things like that. Now, one thing you have to understand is that the purchase of an existing company is not always welcome. Foreigners coming in and buying up a company that's been in business for generations could be conceived as kind of hostile. We're losing a national treasure because now another country's company is going to control it. Some of the ways that we see attempts to prevent takeover are anti-takeover amendments, in which a company that is being targeted for takeover can put amendments to its corporate structure, to its incorporation, that requires a very high percentage of shareholders to agree, not just a majority. Like, you need to have 98% of the shareholders to agree to the takeover. This way, it makes it harder for a company to take you over. Are you going to, unless you're offering a really great deal, are you going to get the number of shareholders that you want? You may have heard of poison pills. These are rights given to managers or shareholders under specific conditions to prevent takeovers. They can be implemented quickly to prevent a takeover. And usually these rights or obligations are set up in a way to make it more expensive, to make it more difficult to take over the company. If you wanted to buy another company, but there were all these hoops you had to jump through in order to be able to do that, you may say, hey, it's not worth it. I'm not doing all that crap. So those are what we mean by the poison pills. Governments, host country governments may well erect barriers to take over. Again, restrictions, things like that. Again, we're trying to prevent you from taking a national treasure away from us, taking control of a certain corporation. Would we want, say, Hershey chocolate to be bought out by a Swiss chocolate maker? Would we want, other things to happen? Does that quintessential American company lose something if it becomes owned by a company in another country, right? So there are lots of things that could prevent you from taking over a company. But however you start international, one of the things that you need to keep in mind is what's the relationship, the financial relationship between the parent company and the subsidiary. Who's going to control the money created by the subsidiary? Who's going to do the financing? Who's going to do a lot of things? So, and you're going to want to look at this before you buy the company. There are going to be things you want to make sure of that you understand, because the whole idea of going international is to raise the bottom line for the parent company. We've already talked about translation exposure, that ability to change one company's financials into and incorporate them into the financials of the parent company. And, how does that differ? How is it difficult to do that, right? So you're going to want to look at a bunch of things before you buy the company to see how easily you're going to be able to translate the money, the financials from your prospective subsidiary into your subsidiary. And I'm going to cut this lecture here so that we can keep these influences all together. So let's go to the second of these lectures.